Good day. My name is Dr. William Lidster. I am the Senior Manager for Information Security and Compliance at AAA Washington. My colleague on this paper, Dr. Sean Rahman from the University of Hawaii, is not able to join us in this presentation. I would like to present our paper, Identifying Influences to Information Security Framework Adoption, Applying a Modified UT-AUT. This paper is actually the second follow-up research to research that was conducted in 2018. I will review that research in 2018 to set the stage for the current research and the current paper that is being presented in this conference. The background relevance in the 2018 paper was pretty clear that information security continues to be an important aspect in organization protection. Information security leaders consistently look for assistance and standards with which to guide risk management in their organization. Standard-setting organizations like ISO, CIS, and NIST have published frameworks that's the result of community contribution to help information security leaders. So the selection of these particular frameworks for a security program is of importance. And what we did not know in 2018, and hence the research question, was what factors influence information security leaders to select a particular framework for managing the information security program in their function or in their organization. The practical implication of the research is that if we could determine what kind of factors there are that influence adoption and application of a particular framework, those standard-setting organizations can make improvements to the framework to increase adoption and usefulness to the security leaders. The 2018 research decided to use the Unified Theory of Use and Acceptance of Technology model to help answer the research question. This model was developed by Venkatesh and others in 2003 and represents the synthesis of 6 different models that all address attitudes towards technology and acceptance in other areas. The idea of the UT-AUT is that there would be one unified model that could address acceptance and use of technology across broad fields. You will notice that there are 4 independent variables on the left and 2 dependent variables more off to the right and 4 moderators to this particular model. We'll explain now the 4 independent variables. Performance expectancy, in a nutshell, is basically the extent to which someone believes that adoption of a technology is going to improve their job performance or their efficiency. Effort expectancy is basically the extent to which someone believes that the technology is easy to use or easy to implement. Social influence looks at the extent to which someone looking at that technology believes that someone else important to them or of influence to them is also using that technology. Those 3 independent variables in the model have an association or an influence on behavioral intent. The idea of I intend to use a particular technology. But intent and facilitating conditions, if you look at the model, will be the factors that influence whether or not you actually use a particular technology. And facilitating conditions is the degree to which an individual believes organizational technical infrastructure and capabilities exist to support use of that technology. The UT-AUT has been used in prior research. Off to the left, you'll see that it's been used in multiple technology-related studies. But it's also been used in technology studies. It's also been used in technology-related studies. And there's 3 examples off to the right. And whether it's been used to identify factors that influence intent and use of software development processes, intent and use of NIST, and the intent and use of ITIL. So from a theoretical contribution, the study in 2018 used UT-AUT to further the use of that model in a technology-related kind of study. Since we had what amounts to eventually 5 independent variables, the 3 from PE, EE, and SI towards behavioral intent, the behavioral intent towards use behavior, and facilitating conditions towards use behavior, we decided to break up the omnibus research question into 5 different sub-questions. And each of those questions were addressed independently. The null hypothesis for each of these research questions was that there would not be a significant relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Our approach was very similar to what Venkatesh did in the seminal work of 2003, introducing the UT-AUT. First, our target population were information security leaders who use a standard-based framework in a medium-sized company. The survey instrument, again, was based off the seminal work of Venkatesh and their original survey instrument. We did add on to our survey instrument some clarifying questions to ensure that respondents were part of the target population. Power analysis, based off estimates of how many security leaders were adopting actual standards-based security frameworks in their environment, indicated that we needed about 384 individuals to defend against type 1 and type 2 errors. When we received the data from the instruments, we used PLS methods to include bootstrapping to conduct validity and t-statistic p-value determination to find where there was significance. Here are the results of the 2018 study. You'll see that between the independent variables that are associated with behavioral intent, there was statistical significance. However, there was not statistical significance between behavioral intent and facilitating conditions towards actual use. So we went back and looked at the data. What we found was, of all of our 384 respondents, nearly 55% indicated that they were required to use a particular framework for their organization. This is not necessarily uncommon, especially depending upon the industry. For instance, in the federal government, FISMA mandates that you will use the NIST risk management framework for security program framework and management. So our original analysis, when we concluded the 2018 research, was that we could not find significance, the factors that were significant towards actual use of a framework. We also found that the UT-AUT model explained 23% of variance for behavioral intent and only 0.8% of variance for actual use. So those things combined, all those things combined, made us conclude that potentially the UT-AUT model was just not an appropriate model to use, where framework is the framework that must be adopted or implemented in an organization is strongly mandatory. So that brought us to this present research in the paper that has been submitted for this conference. So we looked and decided to change the research question. And instead of, and what we did is we said where the use of a framework is not mandated, now what factors influence information security leaders' intent and actual use of a framework, right, to manage the security program in their organization. So we didn't collect new data. We just decided to use a data set from 2018. And by changing the model and removing the moderator voluntariness of use, and then removing respondents from the 2018 study that indicated that use of a framework was mandatory, we removed almost 55% of the responses, which left us 180 responses with which to analyze the data again. So with that being done, we went back and analyzed the data using PLS methods to ensure validity, and then to calculate our t-statistics and p-values. These were the results of our current research, and what you'll find is now we do have statistical significance between all independent variables and dependent variables. So we were able to find that statistical significance. So now, with those samples and that particular research question, we went back to our research questions that were modified, and we were able to reject the null hypothesis that stated there was no statistical significance between each of the independent and dependent variables. You also notice towards the bottom that our explanation of variance improved greatly with the new model under the new research question. Our behavioral intent increased from the 2018 study. Our explanation of variance for behavioral intent increased between the 2018 study of 23% to the current study of 58%. Also, the explanation of variance for youth behavior increased from under 1% to 23.7%. So while we found that statistical significance in our explanation of variance didn't increase, there are some limitations and implications to the current study. First of all, since we do not know the size of the actual target population, which consists of leaders who are not mandated to use a particular standards-based risk management framework for their organization, our sample size used in this particular study of 180 may be too small or too large, and therefore we may be subject to type 1 and type 2 errors. There are other implications to the study. We note that actual use of a framework is highly influenced by voluntariness of use, regardless of the individual's intent to use a framework or the facilitating conditions around one, and that makes kind of practical sense. We also note that improvements in performance expectancy for adopters of a framework, the ease of use of a framework, and advocacy amongst influencers about a framework would increase adoption. Other factors also appear to be relevant that we did not study because they were not in the model towards the behavioral intent to adopt a model, a framework, and the actual use of a framework, as our explanation of variance was still relatively low. That implies that there are more factors that can be influenced, particularly another model or other independent variables and factors should be considered, and that is something that could be done in follow-on research. These are the references from the presentation. In the actual document presented to this conference, there's obviously more. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for listening to the presentation, and I'm very willing to take on questions at this time. Thank you.